And welcome back to the Soar Higher podcast. This is a show for leaders by leaders that's focused on providing business and career advice, tools, and resources to help people achieve higher levels of success in their lives. Great to be back with you. I'm your host, Coach Jason Ballard. It's a pleasure to be with you today. We've got a really great show in store for you, and I'm excited to go through that with you today. We've been talking about on the show for the past 3 weeks, the past 3 episodes have been talking about how to end the year on a strong note. What do you think? What are the types of things we all need to be thinking about at this time of year to ensure that we have all of our ducks in a row and everything going the right direction to end the fourth quarter of 2022 on the best possible foot going forward? All the things that we've learned, all the performance of the first 3 quarters kind of tallied up into the things we need to be doing for the first quarter that will allow you to achieve all of your goals and objectives for this year. At the same time, as leaders, we need to be thinking about the future, always thinking about the vision and where we're going, taking all of the lessons learned from this past year and starting to roll them up into what the next year is going to look like. So over the past 3 episodes, we've been talking about end of year review, how to do that, how to do it well and end strong. We've also been talking about strategic planning. A lot of people don't really understand strategic planning. They're scared of it. They're nervous to deal with it. Most people don't do it. About 80% of the folks out there are not doing strategic planning and goal setting and executing along those lines with their teams, which causes a lot of problems and struggles, as you can imagine. And so we broke down over the past 2 episodes what a strategic plan is, what are its components, how do you create a strategic plan, how do you do that the right way, how do you facilitate that, how do you get the information you need and bring that together and get everybody on one sheet of music. And so hopefully you're getting a lot of value out of that. This is an important time of year for all of us to be going through these types of things. And so to follow back up with that episode, what I see and what I hear all the time are conversations around how to end the year on a strong note, how to create the next plan for them if they have a plan. If they don't have a plan, how to get started in creating a plan. And what I often hear are all the reasons and excuses and things of why they're not doing those things. They're busy, just don't have time to stop and think about the business and where it is and what we should be doing and the lessons learned and those types of things. And so quite honestly, most people don't do enough planning because they get lost in the day-to-day things, the daily activities, the daily firefighting, the daily answering of the phones and dealing with clients with issues and employees and just all of the things that seem to just consume all of our time. And we neglect to work on the business, to get outside of the business, to quit working in it so you can start thinking more about it from the outside perspective going forward. And so, quite honestly, people do get lost in their business journey. Happens all the time. Have conversations with business owners and leaders all across the world in this same predicament. And so they get lost in their business life cycle. So you might be asking, well, what in the world do you mean by business life cycle? It's a journey. It's a literal journey of ups and downs that most businesses will take that takes them to the place where they really want to be or where they just kind of naturally end up. And so it's really broken up into 4 simple components. So when you think about a business life cycle, you think like a sine curve, things starting off at one level, then it goes up, kind of like a roller coaster goes up, and then it could potentially go back down and then back up. And how you navigate your business journey, what they call the sigmoid curve, determines how far you're going to go in your business. And so here's what that looks like. For those that may not know what the business life cycle is, at the beginning, the business is starting up. It's a startup, and people are excited. They're motivated. They've got a product or a service or an idea that they think is going to be a big hit, and they find some money and they start a business and they get excited and they work really, really hard, and things just continue to be hard. It's always hard in the beginning. It's like pushing a rock up a big mountain. It's just a lot of weight to lift a business off the ground. It's like, I give the analogy when I'm working with new business leaders, all of the time, effort, and energy is all in the beginning. It's like, think about your business as a rocket that's being launched off like a NASA launch pad. All that energy, all of the work happens at launch. Once you get a rocket out of the atmosphere against out of the Earth's gravitational force and move forward, it just kind of takes off on its own. But all that force is in the beginning, and so a lot of business leaders are working their tails off to get the business started, and sometimes they fall in a trap where things may not be going as well as they want to. They may not be selling as many things as fast as they want to, and things just may go a little bit differently. And they fall in what they call the 3 feet from gold trap. And that's based off of a true story of a person that bought a business or bought some land out west. This land was supposed to have a bunch of gold on it, and he worked that land for years and years and years. And finally got tired and gave up, and he sold the land to another person. The original owner never found the gold, sold it to another person, and in a short amount of time, the person that bought the land struck gold. One of the largest deposits of gold in the nation's history. True story. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Why didn't the other guy find the gold? Well, they found the gold literally 3 feet from where the original owner had left off. And the moral of the story here is sometimes it's just hard, and you need to keep plowing through it and working through it before you finally cash in and it starts taking off on you. Just like the owner gave up too soon on his aspirations to find gold on the property, and the other person found it. That's in the beginning stages. Then once the business starts taking off, it gets into a growth phase. It's all uphill, all awesome revenue and growth and hiring employees and signing up new clients, and it's exciting. That happens for a few years, and then you run into another challenge called the founder's trap. What in the world is the founder's trap? That's where the original owner, the original organizer of the business, the business starts taking off to where it starts overcoming the owner's ability or the leader's ability in their capabilities to lead, their capabilities and of understanding business on a broader level. This is where things get stuck. They're not progressing. They're not able to move forward. This is where a lot of people get frustrated and overwhelmed by all the business they brought in that they can't keep up with. Business leaders start feeling alone, and they're resisting change, and they're just getting to a point where they just can't keep up with everything and do everything. And they've got to figure out how to delegate, how to grow this business, how to bring on more talent, how to develop more talent, and get out of this trap of being consumed by the business. They're overwhelmed by all the things going on because they're in the business way too much, and they've got to figure out a way to get out of it. The third part of the journey is kind of at the peak of your growth and success, right? It's starting to peak out a little bit, and it's called the success trap. That's where an organization has achieved a higher level of success. You've achieved high goals, revenue, the company's where you want it to be, but this is where some complacency starts setting in. This is where people start taking things for granted, and customer service starts slipping, and response times start getting longer, and the ability to serve and deliver your products and services to the higher levels of quality that people expect start degrading. And this is when you also start experiencing more market competition, and things are just you're kind of coasting. A lot of companies in the success trap have built success. They just rinse and repeat what got them to where they were. They're not really innovating or moving forward. And they're just complacent. They're just riding the wave and just, riding the coattails of their clients that they have, and they're not really pushing things or improving very much. That's where things get interesting, where if you're not careful as a business leader, you can start to go down. And if you don't reinvest and reinvent your products and your services and personalizing the delivery of those things, you're not listening to the customers and responding to their needs, and you're not doing those things to those levels, and you're not reinvesting and innovating and staying ahead of your competition and continuing to go up from where you are now, then you naturally start declining. A lot of companies find themselves coming out of complacency, where the market adjusts, they don't adjust to the market, and they start becoming irrelevant day by day, week by week. And it starts going downhill to the point where sometimes you can't recover from it. They call it the denial trap. That's the last phase for which you could potentially end up going out of business. We saw a lot of this in COVID because a lot of businesses were riding the coattails of a very strong economy before COVID, and they didn't improve. They weren't growing. They were just enjoying the fruits of a very positive and upbeat market that we were all enjoying. Economy was great. The stock market was great. The real estate market was great. Everything was great. And then COVID hit. Then market disruptions hit. And those that weren't prepared, those that weren't doing all the things they needed to be doing, started finding themselves in the denial trap, where things weren't going very well. They couldn't adapt to change. They started becoming irrelevant. Other people started prioritizing things in their businesses, and they couldn't adapt fast enough. They got to the point where they just didn't know what to do. I saw a lot of this during COVID, where just business leaders were kind of frozen by the dynamics and the shutdowns and the mandates, and they just didn't know what to do. And a lot of people, unfortunately, are just very, very proud, and they're scared to ask for help. And this just gets worse and worse. And a lot of people will end up selling or just closing up the shop doors. And so today, I want to, piggyback off of our last 3 episodes, and that a lot of people get lost in this journey. They get lost in between these 4 stages of their business life cycle, their business journey. And it prevents them from it kind of paralyzes them, but prevents them from really maximizing their potential and doing all the things that they are capable of doing. They just either lack the knowledge, the skills, they have fears that are getting in the way. There's constraints that are tripping them up. And so today, to piggyback on top of these things, I wanted to provide a case study, a true story of a client that I have worked with in the past that found themselves in the success trap. They got complacent. They'd been in business for about 13 years, had done very well for themselves, had grown to a good-sized company, but they got complacent. They started resting on their laurels. They struggled to figure out what to do. All the things that they have done to be successful at that point had stopped. They didn't know how to move the business forward, how to think bigger, how to um, get out of their own way in many senses of the situation. And so today I wanted to share a little bit about that. And so I got brought into this particular organization where the leaders were very frustrated. They were not growing. Um, they were riding too much on their existing clients. They hadn't brought any new business, any new logos in about 2 years. Um, some of the people that were brought into the company weren't even the right people. They were hired friends and family members of people, that were leaders in the company, and a lot of times that's a mistake. What I had found was that a lot of people in this company were moved around in different positions, and they weren't even qualified. They weren't even trained. They didn't even have education or certifications or any kind of expertise in any of these different areas of the company. Their marketing, some of their sales and operations and customer service, they were just plugging the holes of the ship as they were moving forward, not even the right way. They didn't have the right alignment of resources to the requirements, and therefore they were kind of at a stalemate. They were like a deer in the headlights and did not know how to move forward. A lot of things they were doing were not working. They had brought in some different consultants at a couple different stages of the game, and they weren't even the right consultants to bring in. And they tried a couple of campaigns and they didn't really work. And so they were very frustrated because they knew in the back of their minds, their company can go a lot farther. They were not tapping into all of the things they were capable of doing. They just didn't have the engine running on all cylinders, and they knew they could do it. They knew those opportunities were there. They just couldn't figure out how to do it. And so I come into this situation. And of course, being an expert in this space, it doesn't take a guy like me long to walk around, ask a few questions, and figure out the challenges, figure out the actual causes to the problems they were having. And I remember sitting across after the end. I was there for about 2 hours. I took a tour of the facilities, and I talked to the people, and I went into a private room, an office with the couple of leaders of the company, and I looked them in the eyes and I said, "So, folks, how serious are you about moving this business forward?" And they all looked at me with a strange look, and they're like, "Well, no, we're serious. We want to move the company forward." And I said, "Are you sure? Are you willing to do what it takes to move the company forward?" Because I'm telling you, there is a lot of change that needs to happen, from people to processes to resources to capabilities to branding and marketing and just everything. There were lots and lots of challenges to solve in this company. Are you willing to do what it takes? If I even sense hesitation in your voice, I'm going to decline this opportunity to work with you. And they all looked at each other. They all agreed. I can see the frustration in their eyes. I can see the pain and the stress that's been on their minds and keeping them up at night. I can just see it on their face, and like, "No, we are ready. How do we do this?" And I said, "Okay, let's map this out and let's get going. First off, what's the vision of your company? How big do you want to go? How far do you want to go? When do you want to go there?" they struggled to answer that question. And I said, okay, let's talk about your plan. Do you have a plan? Is everybody on page with the plan? Do you have a strategy? Do you have goals? Is it written down? Is all components of the company on the same page? And they looked at me and they looked at each other and they're like, no. I said, okay. Well, I think we need to get everybody on the same page or we're not going to go very far. And they all agreed. And so those were the challenges that I noticed right out the gate as I came into this company and was getting to know them and how I may be able to help them. And so we agreed to work together. At the end of the day, when I walked out with the owner, he said, we're at 10 million right now. We think our potential is to go to 20 in the next 24 months. I said, well, how do you know that? How are you deriving that information? He's like, well, just based off of the feedback from our clients and the opportunities that we think could be there. And I said, okay. And so that leads us to the solution. We had a good understanding of the challenges, but we needed to we needed to put some solutions on the table. And so one of the first things we did was an assessment. As a business coach, consultant, etc., people will tell you a lot of things, but they will never, ever, ever tell you everything up front. Sometimes that's intentional. Sometimes they just forget or they don't think about things. They're too close to it to be able to articulate it to you. And so I never take everything a business leader tells me at just face value. I always want to look at it from my own expert set of eyes. And that's where you get value from, an outside person looking in that's a coach or some kind of a consultant. So we started with an assessment. We did a full company-wide assessment. It took about 4 to 5 weeks to do it. Didn't take too long at all. And we looked at everything operationally. We looked at everything from HR and people and culture and hiring and firing. We looked at operations. We've looked at communications across the company. We looked at customer service. We looked at marketing. We looked at sales. We looked at over 10 major areas that encompass kind of a 360 view of this company. And the way that we do that is we kind of score those out individually with, on a scale of 1 to 10 in each area. That leads into a total score at the end, and we match and align up those total scores with the CMMI model that was developed by Carnegie Mellon, the capabilities maturity matrix, which defines companies in, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most mature and operating at an optimal level, and 1 meaning, very, very immature and chaotic. And so this company came in at a number 2, which is basically organized chaos, if it's the easiest way to say it. It was running well. They had some good things going, but were very premature. They lacked clarity. They lacked benchmarks and best practices. They lacked tools and resources. They lacked knowledge. They lacked performance metrics. They lacked a lot of things that a mature company would normally have. And so here's kind of how I shaped this up. They were a 13-year-old company, but they were not a 13-year-old company. They had been in business 13 years. And you would think after 13 years, they'd be a very mature company, but they were not. What I had discovered was they were actually about a 3-year-old company, maturity-wise. And then they just repeated year 3 10 more times. They repeated year 3 10 more times to take them to the 13-year mark, but they were still operating like a 3-year-old company. And when I showcased and I did an outbrief with the leadership team and I walked them through where they're shining and where they're doing well, where they're not doing so well and where they need to improve. And I showed them the scores and I showed them the dashboards and the visuals that surrounded this. They were blown away. They had kind of feelings and thoughts about it, but they were really just blown away. They're like, wow, this really helps us clarify. And we now have a clear starting point of where we actually are. They're starting to get clarity of where they are in this business journey. And I pointed to them on the life cycle map. It's a one-page map of their business journey and pointed directly to where they were in this success trap. And everybody agreed, oh my God, this is perfect. We didn't know this existed, and we get it. This makes sense. This is us. This is where we are. This makes perfect sense. And so from the assessment, we were able to kind of break some things down and start to really get down into the nuts and bolts of their priorities. What are the top 5 priorities you really have in moving your company forward? And we took the assessment, the good and the bad and the ugly there, and the recommendations of that, and created priorities. One of them was obviously revenue. We took a look at what's driving revenue. They didn't have any marketing, any sales plans. They had the wrong people. They weren't even trained and qualified doing those functions. So we soon started putting those things in place. I went back to the drawing board and said, guys, remember in our first conversation, are you willing to do what you need to do to drive the success you wanted to drive? And we needed to get marketing going. So we outsourced marketing to a firm that was a really, really good fit for them, that met their needs and didn't cost them a fortune in the process. We hired some business development people that were trained, qualified business development people that knew how to manage relationships, build relationships, and get in front of people without selling them, and just driving things down people's throats. We found people that were opportunistic, that had the right disc profile, had the right personality, and aligned all of that up with the company culture, and more importantly, their client base and what their clients needed. And when we were able to do that, it just took off like a wildfire. What we had learned through this process is that this company was only selling a couple of different things they were capable of selling to some, they had really big clients, really big clients like Lowe's, Home Depot kind of groups. They were only selling certain things to them. And so we looked at our opportunities and we're like, you could be selling 10 more of the same kinds of things, just differently. And you could be selling that more often. Because once you make a sell, there's nobody that's following up to make sure they're happy, to make sure if they need another order, to manage the relationship. Man, there were all kinds of opportunities. And when we created a relationship program to intentionally manage the relationship of these clients and what they needed on a quarterly, periodic basis, it changed the game. They saw a 1/3 increase in just those components alone in driving new business from existing clients. And I said, hey, every year your 50% of your business, new business, needs to be coming from existing clients in one of the two ways. One, you're selling the same, it's repeat business. You're selling the same things to the same client year after year, and you're keeping that business. Number two, you're selling more things to the same client. And then 3, referrals. Are you getting referrals from your current clients that get you in the door of new clients, right? They were taking advantage of none of those things. They said they were relationship based. They were really not. They were really transactional, but we turned them into a relationship based company. So without even going out and knocking on any new doors and selling the hardest possible way, which is selling to new people, which is harder and takes longer to do, without even just leaning into their current client base, they were able to increase their revenue 1/3. Then partner opportunities to partner were there. They weren't even connecting to the right partners that sold different services to the same people they were selling to. I'm like, well, what if we turned on 10 new partners that you can easily work with and do exchange products and services back and forth, even do work for these partners, in addition to these partners taking you into their clients and you taking them into theirs. There was no partner program. There was no referral program. None of that existed. And we turned that on. That drove another third more business. Easily. In 6 months, we were driving hard and fast, exploding this company. Well, here's what when you turn the water faucet on, you need to make sure that everybody's capable of drinking the volume of water that's coming out of that water faucet. Well, what we found was we had gaps in the operational side. So we worked on the operations and we moved some people around in operations. We brought a couple new people in that were able to grow and scale operations. We found opportunities where they weren't efficient, where they were doing things and doing rework that they shouldn't be doing. We found communication problems. We found certain managers in operations that were trying to control everything and do everything themselves. And they struggled to delegate things to people and follow up with things. They weren't tracking performance and how well they were doing or not doing, and they would keep getting overwhelmed. And so we went in there and fixed that. We mapped all of that out, used Lean Six Sigma principles to help them do that. We trained and empowered more of their people to take ownership of these different aspects of operations. And then we created some ways to be transparent about that and report out on that and ask for help sooner when things aren't going well or things start breaking down, that we can instantly address those things and not let them fester and cause backlogs, etc. And so we also taught those managers how to be leaders. We gave them very intense leadership training and coaching, where I reinforced how to be a leader and how leadership is different than managing. Then we noticed some other areas in the company where there were gaps, and we shifted our priorities towards creating a business model. They didn't really have a true business model. And what do I mean by a business model? A business model defined is a cradle to grave process for which you take a client from A to Z, meaning who are your ideal clients and identifying those. How do you target those people? How do you market those people? Who's involved in that? Once you get somebody interested in what you're doing, when does sales come into the process? What is your sales process to take people through the sales process and convert them into clients in the easiest way possible? Once they become clients, then what do? Customer service comes in, you deliver your products and services. You take them all the way to the end of the process where you're sustaining them and supporting them and continuing to sell over and over to them, grow with them, lead them, manage them, be value added to them over a period of time, right? This particular company did not have a business model, certainly wasn't written down, and certainly people weren't on the same page. And so as we looked at this company, we discovered that there were a lot of silos. Without an integrated business model, without an integrated strategic plan and goals that have everybody on the same sheet of music, what we had found was that there were some silos and empires that were created that were massive, massive barriers to production and efficiency and communication. There was just, the communication was inadequate, and things would drop in the cracks. Things would not be executed in a timely fashion, and everybody's pointing fingers at each other, and it's because there's silos there. When you don't have plans, you don't have business models, you don't have the right things in place, people go out and figure out how to do things on their own, and they just kind of muscle through it in the best way they know how, and most of the time it's not even based off best practices. And so it's just, pulling stuff out of their backside just to get through the day and figure something out, right? And so we put the key leaders in a room, and we, no kidding, over a series of meetings, mapped out an entire cradle to grave business model that everybody was aligned to. And it was interesting going through that process, because we're all sitting in a room, and there were at least 15, 20 different instances that I took in my notes where I facilitated this meeting, where people were not on the same page. They'd say things like, I didn't know you were doing that. Well, why are we doing it that way? Well, why aren't we capitalizing that on opportunity? Well, why is that the best way to do it? And people were just not in sync. Well, they are now, because we implemented this business model, followed into reorganizing the organization, followed by a strategic plan that kind of cemented all of these parts and pieces of the company together in a very integrated way. And all of a sudden, the team started hitting on all cylinders. All of a sudden, the productivity went up. The stress levels went down. The infighting, the competing, the politics, all just kind of just died off, because they were so busy executing all the things we put in place and the way that we prescribed per the blueprint of these things that we laid out and wrote down and gave to all the employees and trained all the employees. It just turned this company around. This company, I would kind of categorize it as kind of gotten off into the ditch a little bit. And so this got them back on the road and really maximizing their potential. And so we had a challenge. We put a lot of different solutions in place. So that ends up in a result. When it was all said and done, how did the story end? What was the results that this company ended up getting? Well, in a matter of 24 months, not only did they hit 20 million in revenue, which is double, they actually hit 23 million in revenue. Yes, they exceeded their projections by 3 million. They hit 23 million. We were able to move them past the success trap to the point where we can launch them back up in an upward trajectory, where we reinvented the company. We put new products and services in place. We revamped some of their current products and services that were starting to go stale and starting to become obsolete. And now the company is operating as a cohesive unit. There are no more silos. There's leadership involvement. One of the issues is there wasn't enough leadership in this company to drive the success of the company going forward, to lift, just like the rocket lifting off the ground analogy I used earlier. More leadership engagement needed to happen. And we train leaders, we develop leaders, even the current leaders and owners, we built their leadership and helped them become stronger executives in this process where there was engagement all around different parts of the company together. We put things, even just simple things in place, where we got them in a weekly cadence of doing things. Every Monday at 8:30 in the morning, we had a 30-minute priority meeting called a stand-up. What are the top priorities this week in the company that have to get done this week? Micro chunks that align the key staff to the things that must happen this week, that's on the agenda, that's most important out of all the things you do in a company. Then we followed that up by a Friday staff meeting. So all the key leaders can look at where the company is from an HR perspective, a hiring perspective, a new benefits perspective, from a sales perspective, a customer service perspective. Everybody gets to see what's going on. Before that, you had one guy that was the leader of the company walking around, talking to people, getting updates. Nobody was on the same page. There were 14 different conversations going on at any given, and none of it was aligned, and nobody was together. Now they're together. They have a cadence of working together as a team and communicating as a team. We got rid of all the silos. We introduced 3 new offerings that they didn't even know they could introduce that immediately was value add and turned on the jets of some revenue that they were leaving on the table. This is money sitting on the table that they were doing nothing with. Weren't even thinking about charging people, weren't even going to add value. Turn that around. We also created service level agreements with their customers so they can all be on the same page as far as expectations of what's going to be delivered, when it's going to be delivered, and how it's going to be delivered. That made a world of difference. That took them from reactive into being proactive. They were on the receiving end of all of their clients all of the time, chasing down issues and problems and gaps. This realigned them. We also put in quarterly customer reviews where the customer service groups of this organization would reach out and had deep relationships with their clients and go through how they're performing, how things are going. It made a world of difference. The customers started telling them things they never even knew was going on and just kept handing them new work over and over and over that was being left on the table. The company had no idea this stuff was even an opportunity for them. They also picked up 60% more repeat business from clients. They also picked up 17% more referrals. And we also were able to decrease their expenses and cut some fat off the bone and trim some things that was duplicate efforts and streamline the company and cut expenses by 8%. And we also cut rework, poor quality going out the door, causing the company to do rework by 30%. So folks, when you add up all these things, that adds up to a lot. This company is a sprawling, thriving company that is it's like a machine. It's like a saw blade just sawing right through the competition, sawing right through the clients, delivering excellence every single day. They have a whole new mindset, a whole new culture, whole new company going forward. And they needed that. They needed to break through out of the success trap and reinvent themselves as the next best company. And they have far surpassed anybody in their competitive space. The next best person to them is probably 5 years behind them. And so what an amazing story that I thought could be of huge value, especially this time of year, because these are the types of things that leaders need to be thinking about. This is the time of year when you're thinking about how to close out the year. What mistakes did we make? What lessons do we need to be incorporating going forward so that we won't repeat those things? How do we reinvent ourselves? How do we improve and take our game to the next level? This is a true story of a client that leveraged the things we've been talking about over the past 3 to the 4 episodes now that really transformed their company into a conquering company of the future. And so I just wanted to share that with you because I felt there's a lot of people out there that can relate to this story, that can get a lot of value from this story. And so that's what this podcast is about. I've said this before, I'll say it again. This podcast is about giving people knowledge, giving people access to business leaders, experts, coaches, folks that are really killing it out there in the world, and giving access for everybody to take and leverage and learn. This is about tools and resources. This podcast was built through my passion. As you can tell, I'm a very passionate person to help people unlock their potential, because people go to sleep at night stressed and worried about what the future may bring because they're scared. They're scared to make a mistake. They're scared to take a step forward. They know they can do better. Leverage the things that we talk about on this show. Leverage these tools and resources we're providing you, and do something with it. Again, you have access to all of the resources that we can provide you for free. You can go out to my website at soarhighercoaching.com. There's a resources tab, there's assessments, there's articles, there's best practices, there's the podcast, there's all kinds of things you can leverage. Even if you're a small company on a budget, you can leverage for free that can help you break through where you may be in your journey. And so I hope you get a lot of value out of this. We put a lot of work into this podcast and all the things that we talk about on it. And so if you have any further questions or concerns, feel free to reach out. There's an email via the show notes of the podcast. You can reach out if you have questions or concerns. Again, you can reach out to my website at soarhighercoaching.com. There's a contact us page. You can book free consultations if you want to learn more and discover what may be in the art of the possible for you. So been a real pleasure to spend time with you today. We've got some really, really powerful sessions coming up with some amazing guest speakers. We hope you stay tuned into that, because these are going to be huge transformational things for you, your business, and your life. So look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Soar Higher. Have a great one.